So here's a question for you. I know your kids are young, but if your kids were to ask you to explain, Dad, why is there a work stoppage going on? How would you explain it to them?
Well, certainly we're at the point where, it is officially a work stoppage. We're not missing games or anything, but I think my son loves baseball. So, to him, I would say, it's a little bit more complicated than just a game. It is a business. To build these big, beautiful stadiums, to sign these players, to all the pieces, all the wheels that have to go in motion are part of the business in the game. And that's negotiated by the players in a sense against the owners in order to get a deal through what's called collective bargaining. So, again, we have history. Our players unionized back in the 60s. And once they did that, it gave them a lot of leverage to negotiate and to get a lot of the great things that I myself have been able to attribute to playing this game.
Yeah, and Andrew, during these periods that you've been involved in, it's categorized or classified as labor peace. So did you feel that way going through it, that it was important to try to figure out a way to accomplish all that's been done in the last 2 decades to have peace? Or was that something that, you kind of weren't sure what the repercussions that you might kind of pay later? I mean, how has that peace been in your mind?
Yeah, absolutely. Other than my childhood, and I was a fan of the game for the '94 strike and losing that World Series and all that came with that, and the downside of having to win fans back, really. But since then, you're right, it has been peace, and that's a good thing. That means that things are working and things are going well, and we're able to get a deal done every 5 years. Historically, is the way baseball does it, at least since I've been around, and that's a great thing. But at the same time, we've seen changes in the game, and this is our chance as players to address those changes. And we're not exactly happy. That's no secret. We've certainly seen it, particularly since the last deal. Things have changed in ways that maybe we didn't quite foresee and didn't quite plan for. And that's the way it works under the system we have. Now is our chance to adjust the system to make it work a little bit better.
Look, we want to ask you about some of that stuff, but let me ask you this, since you alluded to this. How much do you worry about how fans react even to a lockout in December? I've covered a lot of labor talks, and I know how fans think, and this is an excuse for a lot of people to unload on baseball, and that always pains me as somebody who loves it. I don't know if you hear from fans. How much do you think about fans as you go through this process and avoiding the pain and the repercussions of potentially actually missing games?
Yeah, I mean, constantly. The fans are the lifeblood of this game. That's what keeps us going. And a lot of what we're trying to accomplish is things to make the game better, make the game more competitive. Baseball was having this huge positive movement, all the signings that we had, the teams that were excited, the teams that now felt like they were going for it or adding players. And that was a great story for baseball. That's something we can all get behind. That's the kind of thing that my neighbors want to talk about in the street. And, the kids that come over to my house want to ask about, how's this guy going to be on this team? And we lost that. And the reality is the lockout is a move by management, by baseball. Whether I agree or disagree with it doesn't really matter. That was their decision, and it's where we are, so we have to tackle that the best we can. But yeah, it's something we always concern ourselves with, and the fans are ultimately what drive this game.
Yeah, so you alluded to this. In the days leading up to the lockout deadline, we saw more than $2 billion committed to free agents. It felt kind of ironic. Obviously, there's a lot of money in baseball, and obviously a lot of that money is going to players. So how would you explain what players have an issue with?
All right, that's I guess the first thing I would say is that one good free agent, kind of boon doesn't mean that everything's okay. And the reality is this is an incredible free agent class. So let's first of all give those guys credit and what they deserve. And if anything, for me to spin this on its head is it maybe raises more questions about what's happened in other free agency periods that we've had challenges and things have moved slow. So a lot of this stuff is, it's kind of an economic theory, understanding the situations of free agency that, I'm not an expert on, to be honest with you. I keep up. I try to know as much as I can, but we fortunately have a bunch of bright economists and whatnot that can help us guide us through these situations. But I guess that would be my first reaction to that. And then, ultimately, what we're trying to do is we've drawn a lot of issue with essentially the way, competitive nature of teams hasn't grown the way we've expected to. Every player steps on the field every single day. Shoot, every player right now is working out, competing, trying to be better and try and help themselves and their team win games next year. And we think that a lot of the issues maybe with, you want to talk about free agency, are drawn back to not enough teams. And the reality is, I think every team, but too many teams not attempting to compete at that moment in time for that year, or even in a lot of cases for multiple years. So I think we look to address a lot of that stuff. There's certainly a lot of moving pieces and how we accomplish that. But right now, maybe the system that's in place is starting to be exploited by, teams in certain situations in order to kind of elongate these rebuilding sessions. And that's not good for the game of baseball. And, not good for fans. Fans want to go out and see a competitive product every night. And that's what we want to sell to them is, the best version of baseball, no matter where they catch a game, no matter what time of year.
Well, and Andrew, a lot of this comes through leadership, and certainly you've taken a lead role, executive subcommittee. What has been sort of the messaging to be able to keep players all together on this? Because as you mentioned free agents, there's, wealthy free agents, there's rookies, there's a middle class. There's been a lot of discussion about the middle class and concerns there. How has it been that leadership's been able to say, yes, we are in different stages, but we're on the same page?
Yeah, I think, not to call you old, but communication is key. And I'm sure that's been preached to you, but we're lucky.
You can call them old. It's fine.
All right. Yeah, no problem.
We're lucky in this day and age. I've seen it through my career. The technology is something that's in our favor. The ability for guys to communicate through text message and FaceTime and group chats and social media and stuff like podcasts. And that will allow us to get our message to everybody and make sure everybody is involved and therefore able to understand, why this piece needs to move this direction or why we're fighting for this. Because the reality is all of our proposals are meant to help every player in every class, in every situation, in every position. And a lot of times it may not seem as straightforward as others. And we have to be able to communicate that to guys so that they understand that, hey, this is the big picture. This is why this moving piece affects this piece. And the reality is that's exactly it. Is we're looking to address every class of player in every situation and improve upon what they have now.
And Andrew, just, with respect to that, being able to accomplish that, what I noticed that was impressive to me is your executive subcommittee, a lot of the leaderships, these are tremendous players, Max Scherzer, Francisco Lindor, Garrett Cole. That wasn't always the case. I mean, there was definitely periods before I played that a lot of star power was in the room. But I'd say in my career, that was kind of loose. I mean, maybe you saw Tom Glavine later, but there was a lot of top flight players that weren't necessarily involved in the day-to-day meetings. What impact does that have to have that kind of leadership willing to go to the mat for the organization for the future?
It's huge. And you're right. Not everybody wants to see a middle reliever stand up and talk about this stuff. So you mentioned star players. I mean, Max and Marcus Semien signed their deals, and that's basically what they were asked about on the podium in front of their new team was how's collective bargaining going? And for us to have guys like that are educated on all the topics and understand and also willing to put their names out there and stand up for everything is, in my view, greatly important. And we're very lucky to have them. And whether they were star players or not, they would bring a lot of value, but that just is a kind of icing on the cake for us.